what we're looking at here is acts of genocide disguised as self-defense. Like, oh, you trans people are the ones causing the problems. You know, you are the ones, whatever. We often use euphemisms. Hello again from Editing Lux. I didn't really know where this one fit in, so I'm just here to let you know that I have now seen video evidence of a political candidate explicitly calling for the execution of queer and trans people. It's not a euphemism, so it didn't really fit into the euphemism part. I'm not really sure where this is going to end up in the video, but here is the clip of this person saying this thing.
The LGBT.
All right, so this person, we're going to talk about them more later on. This is, you can see, it says Pastor Mark Burns. I want to be clear. Mark Burns has also been running for office in, I believe it's South Carolina, as a senator in the last election cycle and this election cycle. So keep in mind, the stuff that he says right now, he's saying while running for political office. And for those of you that are LGBT, but conservative leaning, or buy into the garbage that like Milo Yiannopoulos is peddling, like, oh, conversion therapy works for... Okay, I want you to listen to this man. Listen to Mark Burns. Believe him in what he says, because he absolutely would include you in any group that he includes LGBT. It doesn't matter to him whether you are conservative or you support his views, okay? I want to be clear. So Pastor, he believes, as a true believer in Christ, that LGBT people and their families deserve to be killed by the state. All right? Would you vote for this man? I just want to be clear. If your family's okay with you and you're like, well, I'm kind of a degenerate, but my family loves me and I'm still... I want to be clear. He wants you murdered. And he wants your family that supports you or lets you live there, he wants you shot in the back of the head. Luxander did a video. If you're not sure who Luxander is, it is a trans person who is another streamer. I don't know how. I mean, they're way more popular than we are. And as far as our own pronoun situation goes, we're still she, her. We do have a dissociative disorder, so if we switch from the singular, like I, to we, that's what's going on. I'll try and stick to the I and me pronouns, but if I slip in like a we or us periodically, just know it's because we have a dissociative disorder, and that's just unavoidable at this point as I'm working out my own issues. However, Luxander did a video quoting from, I want to say it was a Holocaust museum. Now, this is like, it sounds pretty extreme already, like Holocaust Memorial Museum type of thing. But we'll jump right into it. We'll listen to Lux and see what Lux has to say. And then I'll add my own commentary on top of it if I feel like anything needs to be added. I did get its permission before doing this, so I'm not pulling something where I'm just taking some other content creator's video and using it for my own purposes. That's not what's going on now, actually. I think it did such a good job in this video that if my followers, for whatever reason, are not also following Luxander, then I want everyone to be aware of this. And as I've stated before, Luxander is trans, and its pronouns are it, its. So please be respectful when commenting about that. So let's get into it.
Played against trans people and queer people, national, ethnic, racial, or religious groups, or so-called cultural genocide. So it's one of those fuzzy
defining genocide, first of all.
So intent is technically part of it. The intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial or religious group in whole or in part. It does not include political groups or so-called cultural genocide. So it's one of those fuzzy things. here where like you could technically say someone could argue it's not genocide because gay people or LGBT people have a political ideology. They have an agenda, as opposed to national, ethnic, racial, or religious, which are technically considered like intrinsic traits, even though religion is not an intrinsic, whatever.
Right. The thing that the point that it's making here, and I want to be clear about this, is that religion is not the same as gender or sexual orientation. And I would make this argument because it's a categorical fallacy. When we talk about something like religion, that is something that actually does come across as more arbitrary. That is something that like you basically get converted over to being a Christian or to being a Muslim or to being a Buddhist. But you could deconvert from that faith. The fact of the matter is that being gay or being trans, these are intrinsic portions of one's identity. You cannot just simply opt out of that. It just doesn't happen that way. And I think like right here would have been a great place for Lux to point out that this would be a categorical error on anyone that wants to say that LGBT people should not be considered as part of any type of genocide versus any other group. It absolutely is. And I would also go on to argue that there could be some groups, specifically like religious groups, that could be considered part of a genocide, right? Like we would argue that the definition of genocide here is actually not broad enough, but let's go on.
But this is to say that it does not, like, you technically, I guess you cannot commit genocide against like communists. Technical definitions aside, we're going to now look at the 10 stages of genocide. This is an infographic from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust.
All right, so it's the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. Now this is going to be very frightening for any trans, especially trans people that might be following me, or if you are LGBT. Just be aware, trigger warning, these next 9 steps that are going to be described are going to be fairly frightening. I'm going to divide this stream up into each segment that I do, so that if you don't want to sit and watch like a 4-hour stream, you don't have to watch the entire thing to get the content. You can just select the portions that you want to watch. And we understand if you don't particularly want to watch a segment about our possible genocide, although you should be aware of it. And if you don't know about it, this would be a great thing to watch. And you might have some people say to you, like, I don't know if yeah, sure, trans people are persecuted. Sure, there's some bigotry against like LGBT people. However, I don't know if it like qualifies as like a genocide. Well, let's see, right? By the way, new outfit. I hope that you enjoy it. I'm slowly like upgrading myself and the set and everything else, but let's see what Lux has to say about this.
We're going to kind of look at all of the steps and take a moment to sort of reflect on the ways in which we can see these things happening in the current time. You know, by the way, if you haven't clicked like on the video, please click like on the video, babes. Please click like on the video, babes. Oh my God, I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. If you've not clicked like on the stream or on this video later on when you're watching it, please click like on it, because I, like every other YouTuber, do need those likes, do need those subscriptions, and we would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as always, leave a comment letting us know what you think about us or the video in and of itself.
So much. Let me go ahead and switch this around and pull this up. We are going to now look at this infographic, like I said, from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, the 10 stages of genocide. The 10 stages of genocide. Stage 1, classification. The differences between people are not respected. There is a division of us and them, which can be carried out using stereotypes or excluding.
All right, so we've got Crowder right here, outside of Planet Fitness, dressed up as a trans woman. Crowder is known as, it's Steven Crowder, by the way, infamously dressing up in essentially just drag so that he can go into gyms and other businesses, then act like a ditzy, obnoxious trans person and make everybody there feel uncomfortable and basically insist using like vehemently that people must use the correct pronouns for him as he's being obnoxious and engaging in typically male behavior while he's dressed up in drag. Crowder is a piece of shit, and if you watch any of Crowder's shows on this period of watching shows on trans people, you'll know that he and his little buddy sit around like cackling as a bunch of hyenas while never actually making any type of insightful commentary about trans people. They just continuously put on this get up and essentially just laugh at trans people for being women.
People who are
totally out of
perceived to be
spite.
different. Very low level stuff here, the stuff that doesn't seem crazy harmful, right? Stage 2, symbolization. This is a visual manifestation of hatred. Jews in Nazi-occupied Europe were forced to wear the Yellow Star of David. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge forced people from the Eastern Zone to wear blue scarves. It shows you these little infographics of here's a Star of David, here's that scarf. From 1992, in northwest Bosnia, all non-Serbian citizens were forced to wear white armbands. So this is, just like the people are being specifically marked in some way. Like they're being made to be visible in this way, which you could technically, you could like technically say that systematically denying people access to hormones and transition is a means of making sure that they remain visible. Stage 3.
I would also like to add here, I think you could also argue that there are some states in the United States that have insisted on certain bills, especially DeSantis being among them, that that children should have to, in order to play certain sports, should have genital inspections. And I think that specifically to weed out trans athletes, or essentially people that they will, like trans people that they will later go on to claim are essentially like impersonators, or, oh, this is a, whatever, a boy that claims to be a girl, and then deny them access to compete in the sports. We will get to a lot of this later. There's, unfortunately, this stream, it's definitely going to be my Pride Month stream, and I want to be clear. This stream is absolutely about pride, okay? But not in the sense of corporate hack sellouts, but in the sense of what pride was supposed to be about. Being pissed off about discrimination against LGBT people, okay? The original Pride, yes, at Stonewall, was absolutely a riot. Now, I don't have necessarily enough energy to bring like 4 or 3 hours, however long this goes on, worth a riot to you, but I will say that I'm pretty fucking angry at a lot of this stuff going on. I'm going to try to like watch my language for the rest of the video. I don't want to get like totally demonetized and not have my video shared or anything like that just based on something as dumb as language. Although it's very telling that a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I don't want somebody on my YouTube video swearing back and forth. And what if the kids hear about it? Well, whatever. Okay. Like this is, the censorship of swearing and curse words is ridiculous in the context of what Lux is talking about and what is actively going on in our society. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we have passed, like, fanning ourselves about swear words like fucking 15 years ago. All right, I'll try and bring it back down a little bit. Sorry. So we're moving past inspecting children's genitalia in order to participate in high school sports as discrimination. Let's go on to the next step, dehumanization.
Discrimination. The dominant group denies civil rights or even citizenship to identified groups. The 1935 Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their German citizenship, made it illegal for them to do many jobs or to marry German non-Jews. Discrimination can take many forms. This is, just denying civil rights broadly. It gives you one specific example, but this can happen in a number of different ways. Obviously, like, being...
Trump administration erases transgender civil rights protections in healthcare. Just think about that for a second. a lot of right wingers, they'll say that, oh, I don't really care about, your transgender ideology. I don't really care about your, gay, LGBT, whatever. Just keep away from the kids, as part of this like whole groomer narrative that's being pushed right now. No thanks to shitheads like Shiwan Head or others that retweeted the pictures from Folsom, a like kink festival that they portrayed as being from Pride. But let's just put all of that aside, okay? Because we're not talking about tweets right now. We're not talking about people trying to make LGBT people out to be pedophiles or predators, which they have historically used against us continuously. We're talking right now of the denial by Florida using the power of the state to deny people access to healthcare. All right, do you see how the goalposts have shifted here? Like well away from like, oh, we're just worried about, a few perverts talking to kids. And they've shifted that all the way to our healthcare that fast. And they do it with a little sleight of hand, a shell game that the children are over here, healthcare's over here, and they just switch that around. Oh, don't worry, we're protecting the kids. When in actuality, we're after the healthcare. If you're curious about fallacious thinking, it would be a Mott and Bailey fallacy, right? Their actual Mott is protect the kids, but the Bailey is get rid of trans rights, or ultimately get rid of trans people.
Being denied housing at a systemic level and not having that addressed, being underemployed at a systemic level and not having those economic equalities.
So it's difficult for trans people to find work, as we constantly get fired. A lot of trans people, if you'll also notice, end up going, especially trans femmes like myself, end up going into sex work. And some people say, well, that's obvious evidence of your degeneracy. You wouldn't go into sex work if you weren't some type of degenerate, like sex crazed freak. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of us have to go into sex work because that's the only line of work that we can still get, because we've been discriminated out of other areas of work, or housing can be even more difficult for us to find, people refusing to rent to us or whatever else. And in that case, we end up in a situation where we have to take whatever we can fucking get. I'm sorry, freaking get.
Economic inequalities addressed. Stage 4, we have dehumanization. Those perceived as, quote, different are treated with no form of human rights or personal dignity. During the genocide in Rwanda, for example, Tutsis were referred to as cockroaches. The Nazis referred to Jews as vermin. So we are currently seeing this big time. Like, we are at minimum stage 4 here on account of trans people being called it and trans people being called groomers and pedophiles.
Okay, I just want to point out real quick. When they say trans people or LGBT people being called pedophiles, first of all, Luxander uses it pronouns. So, yeah, even though that might be not a preference that a lot of the rest of us have as far as like trans people just in general, it's fine if your pronouns are it's. However, when a conservative or a Republican is using it's, let's just be clear. They are doing that to dehumanize the person, not because they think that that's the person's actual pronouns. Just like when they're talking about a trans femme person, they will refer to us as they, them, when they damn well know our pronouns are she, her, or however they can misgender us. On this point, not only did the Nazis refer to Jews as vermin, okay? One of the things that Lux, with all due respect, overlooked here is the very fact that, and by the way, this is like, I appreciate all the sources, I appreciate the tweets, I appreciate all the add-ons. This is a great video, and I feel like everybody that is a subscriber of my channel, go subscribe to Lux's channel as well. If not, I would just say you at least need to see this video and be aware of this. One of the things that I would like to add here, though, is, and this is absolutely true, conservatives tend to add that LGBT people are vermin or a disease. They refer to us very often as if being around us will make their kids gay, or it will turn their kids gay to be around gay people. And they often cite religious reasons or whatever else, and invoke this language as if being LGBT is a disease, a sickness, a mental illness. They use this against us all the time. And I want to draw attention to this. Being LGBT is not a sickness. It is not a mental illness. It is not a disease, but that's what they will pretend. However, Lux makes a great point here, and let's watch this segment where a Republican is going to run an ad where he claims to be against LGBT people. And let me take a look at the chat real quick. Yeah, no, I'm unfortunately I'm up very late. It's nice to see you, Critical. It's nice to see you, Lilith, as always. Unfortunately, I was having a lot of problems getting the just problems with the stream, of course, like amateur streamer, right? So I was supposed to start like a couple of hours ago. I started very late, and unfortunately, that means that it's early in the morning. But whatever, I'm going to look. If you want to stay here with me, I'm right fucking here with you, okay? You want to get through the early, at the wee hours of the morning, I'm right here with you for that time, all right? I'm going to be going until like probably like 3 or 4 a.m. at this point. But you know what? I'm here. I'm full of energy. I'm full of piss and vinegar. Let's do this.
That is just, I mean, I think it's pretty emphatically clear that that's sort of just where we're at right now. Yeah. So then moving on to the next step, we have organization. Genocides are always planned. Regimes of hatred often train those who go on to carry out the destruction of a people. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier about stochastic terrorism. And just to refresh, stochastic terrorism is when you cannot directly make it so that it's the death penalty for a trans person to be trans, but you can feed the media a bunch of lies about trans people and how scary they are in order to incentivize people to be violent toward us. So that's what stochastic terrorism is. It's drumming up hatred in the hopes that other folks will take over the genociding for you to an extent. So the Sudanese government supports and arms the Janjaweed or Arab militia in Darfur to carry out violence and killings in Sudan. Hello, it is I from the more recent past. Since the time that we originally streamed this and now when I'm editing it, there has been an update on number 5. Originally I said, I don't know exactly that there is an amount of organization happening with militia groups or anything because I would have to know what's happening internally within the Proud Boys. So there's been an update about that situation. Turns out that I believe in Idaho, there was a group of men loaded up into the back of a U-Haul on their way to a pride event, seemingly with body armor and seemingly with intent to start a riot or some other kind of disruption. They were members of Patriot Front, which is a white supremacist group, and perhaps you could even say a militia group.
Okay, hi, past Luxander. It is I, future Zoe, and I'm here to tell you that I read more about this. And yes, Patriot Front and specifically the members in that U-Haul, they did have riot shields. Some of them did. And they also had batons like that, you know, police would use to beat protesters and that type of stuff. Now, I can't say psychically what the future would have held if this U-Haul had gotten to that pride event. But we can pretty much assume that if we have an anti-LGBT, essentially hate group packed up in the back of U-Haul, all of them wearing like white masks with sunglasses, ball caps, and the same type of uniforms to stop themselves from being identified. A lot of them had plastic like shields, and they had batons to beat people with. What are some of the types of things that they might have engaged there? I'm just saying, a little bit of intuition.
So yeah, there are organized groups.
All right, Critical, have a good morning, and I hope you either, if you're up late, I hope you get some rest, and if you're starting early, then may the force be with you, my friend.
Of men with body armor who have decided that it's time to come show up at the queer place and have words with us, or something along those lines.
Thanks, Ben. I have chosen pink today, as well as some purple and some black gloves. I'm enhancing my look a little bit. I can't be too vain though with the topic that's going on. But yeah, I like it a little bit more in the intense red, and I changed the background a little bit.
Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Stage 6, polarization. Propaganda begins to be spread by hate groups. The Nazis used the newspaper Der Stürmer to spread and incite messages of hate about Jewish people. This is definitely happening. You've got the Daily Wire movie that just came out called, like, What is a Woman?
Hashtag fuck Matt Walsh, by the way.
Politicians out here calling us trans terrorists.
I think some of the most dangerous people in America are trans terrorists.
And saying, like...
That was Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, senator from Georgia. So now we've got a senator involved in this garbage.
Oh, if someone was weird toward my family in a bathroom, then I would kill that person. But, like, you're really just only one step away from saying, like, we should basically just be violent toward trans people if we clock them in general in public, but especially in the locker room. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, everybody.
If I was a parent and my 5th grade daughter had to sleep and shower in some kind of cabin at some summer camp that I paid money to send my child to, and there was a man calling himself a woman sleeping in her cabin, showering with her, that guy he'd be in jail. He would be in jail. Well, first off, my husband.
First of all, if this person that Marjorie Taylor in this imaginary situation is identifying as a woman, they would just be a woman. And so therefore, when, the entire premise here, she is misgendering, like Marjorie Taylor is misgendering this woman. It's just the threats, just outright threats to say, she would be beaten, would be whatever. Okay. I want to draw attention to this very clearly. They're not talking about that there should be some gender neutral bathroom, okay? They are saying, Marjorie Taylor in this case, and this is a senator that is very wildly popular in conservative circles. She is saying that people like myself or Blair White or other trans women should be beaten or possibly murdered for using bathrooms appropriate for our gender.
Would have beat him into the ground, and then he'd be in jail. But this is exactly how we need to stand up against this stuff.
It all seems innocuous. It all seems so innocuous as you go through it, okay? That's the reason why this is so scary, and it's so important for you to be informed and to be aware of what's happening, because each step seems like no big deal.
I mean, honestly, it does seem like a big deal each step to me, but that's just my perception on this, right? I feel like when Marjorie Taylor Greene says things like that, like quote unquote beat into the ground, we ought to pay attention to this, especially because historically the gay panic defense has been used to justify the murder of LGBT people. And this has been gay men in the case of Matthew Shepard. This has been the case in, various cases involving trans women that were murdered by cis men. Now, I'm not going to pull up the details of the case because it's too upsetting for me to look at or read. I cannot look at it without getting too upset to continue streaming. But very recently, there was a football player who was exonerated for murdering a trans woman that he had essentially slept with or possibly was looking to engage in sleeping with, became like suspicious of her, and then left her house, then returned 1 month later. So there's a full month in between these events. He returned a month later with 2 friends to confront her and then brutally beat her to death. And in the trial, in the case, it was stated that she did not attempt to defend herself as he assaulted her, and he beat and stomped her to death. Now, I just have to, sorry. In the case, the reason why they said that they eventually exonerated him was because the charges were like for a premeditated murder charge. And they basically tried to use the gay panic defense that was struck down. But then the court ultimately decided that they should have gone for manslaughter instead of premeditated murder. Now, I don't know about you, but in my book, manslaughter is like when you accidentally hit someone with your damn car and you were not intending to kill them. That's manslaughter. You accidentally killed someone, right? In his case, he waited a full month, got his friends, knew he planned on assaulting this woman, went to her house, casually like got himself back in there so he could gain access to her while she was vulnerable, then beat her to fucking death. I don't need to hear that this is manslaughter. This is outrageous. I would love Marjorie Taylor Greene, I would love any of them to face a situation like that. Then claim that their assailant, it was just manslaughter at best. They should only be charged with attempted manslaughter. It's not like if anybody premeditatedly went over to their house with the intent to do something to them, that they would not insist that that was premeditated murder attempt. Right? But when it comes to trans people, they want to deny us literally human rights as outlined right here. Okay. That's their goal in this, is to demonize us, make sure that we're seen as like a disease or a plague, something that can be transmitted to kids or groomers or pedophiles. And they will do a sleight of hand here, a shell game, and say, well, you know what we should do with pedophiles. And when we say pedophiles, we mean LGBT people, and they'll switch these things around so that, of course, what you would do to pedophiles, you would also do to LGBT people. It's a bullshit way that they manipulate people, but a lot of people fall for this for some reason. And I hate to tell you, but a lot of LGBT conservatives would also end up being taken care of along with the rest of the pedophiles.
Keeping in mind that in Nazi Germany, they burned all of the books in the Hirschfeld Library, the Sexual Institute of Study, and I'm sure that there were plenty of people who were like, oh, it was just a book burning, you know? They didn't kill anybody, they didn't hurt anybody, they just burned all of the books that had anything to do with studying this one particular hated minority demographic, okay? Each individual step doesn't seem like a big deal, but you need to be alert and aware of the pattern, okay? So again, differences between people are not respected. There's a division of us versus them. Stereotyping, like the way that Steven Crowder dresses up like a trans woman on his show and like goes into Planet Fitness and pretends to be a ditzy trans woman. Like, it starts there. Visual, like making sure that they're visually different, denying trans kids the opportunity to transition. So
I would agree with you, Lilith. Marjorie Taylor Greene absolutely is a Christian nationalist and a bigoted piece of garbage, as well as recently coming out and saying that, you know, in her opinion, there's nothing wrong with being a nationalist, especially a Christian nationalist. So if you are secular and you are worried about the separation of church and state, and you think that trans people, for whatever reason, pose that, you know, because we're just so crazy and out of it, I think you should really go and take a look at Marjorie Taylor Greene's words when it comes to Christian nationalism, and recognize that if people like Marjorie Taylor Greene have their way, you will be living in a Christian theocracy, just so you know.
So that they continue to look trans, discrimination in all kinds of different situations, dehumanization, referring to people in terms that strip them of their humanity. Like, keep in mind, like, the reason why terms and slurs like the T slur, you know, like if someone calls a trans person a, then that word being used in that way it's a noun that replaces other human nouns, that says, like, fundamentally you are not the same as me. And that's why that type of language, otherizing language, alienating language, is considered dehumanizing and dangerous. Okay, keep that in mind.
It's really sad that we basically live in a time where you have to explain to people that labeling a group as like a disease or like rats or a plague or vermin, why that would negatively affect them. And while I think that we live in an age of information where you can go on and you can Google or Wikipedia a lot of information, there's a lot of people that, unfortunately, it seems like you're kind of like everyday Joe, basically just listens to media or whatever they've been kind of told. And I know that they like to make the accusation against like the LGBT community and trans people particularly, like we have somehow we snuck in and like ninjas, like indoctrinated people. But that's not the case. And it's very kind of stunning to us that those people just fall for propaganda endlessly. And it's sad that it would take people like Luxander, people like ourselves, to continuously push back on these narratives. Now, we'll get into other narratives later, all right? We're opening this, and this will be like our multi-hour stream about LGBT stuff for Pride Month. And I'm sorry this is not a happy Pride Month and a let's look at the parades and have a good time and all this other stuff, right? This, unfortunately, is a stream where we're going to be focusing on a lot of negativity because cannot overstate the threat to LGBT people currently within the system, propagated by right-wing activists. They want to call us left-wing activists. They are right-wing activists by definition. But let's let Lux finish this, and then we'll get to some of the other, people that we actually disagree with.
Stage 5, organization. Again, I would say that this is being perpetrated via stochastic terrorism, okay? Polarization, we just talked about. So this is kind of now moving into we're in the next 4 steps and we need to be alert for this kind of thing, okay?
Not just alert, but we need to be really cautious and already making plans. Now, at the end of this segment, whenever Lux gets to the end of this, I'm going to go over a few tips and strategies for trans people and just LGBT people in general going toward the future to kind of take care of yourself if things go as bad as they possibly could. And if you are LGBT, hopefully by the end of the stream, you'll start recognizing the threat that these people pose to you, that conservatism poses in general. And no matter what, stop voting for these people. Or I cannot explain to you how much of a political stooge that you're being. I don't care whatever your opinions are or thoughts are on abortion, any of these other issues. Just know, if you are LGBT, these people, right-wingers, conservatives, plan on eventually exterminating you. And that is not rhetoric. That is literally what their plan is. And we'll get to that as we go through each of the other people that I have lined up. And we'll look at some of the stuff that people have said. And then you can determine for yourself whether I'm exaggerating or whether I'm telling you exactly what they are saying if you would just listen to them and trust them when they tell you this is their plan.
So preparation. Perpetrators plan the genocide. They often use euphemisms such as the Nazi phrase, the final solution, to cloak their intentions. Acts of genocide are disguised as self-defense if there is an ongoing armed conflict or civil war, such as in Bosnia. The kind of stuff that's being...
Okay, acts of genocide are disguised as self-defense. I just want to point out, trans panic, gay panic, very easily to say, oh, well, I didn't, it's not that I wanted to murder them, but they deceived me in some way. They lied to me in some way. And I panicked when I discovered that they were a trans person and I just had to murder them. Okay. Now, even though in the case of the footballer that I mentioned earlier, that was thrown out by the initial judge wanted to allow it as a legal defense, but it was struck down by another judge. Now, let's imagine we have a Trump administration in 2024 that decides that is actually going to be placed back as a legitimate defense, right? So now we have a way to start murdering LGBT people once again and just claim that, oh, you didn't know that they were gay and they came on to you and you just had to, rough them up a little bit and you didn't mean to take it that far. But then we can imagine taking it a little bit further, as some other conservatives have advocated for, where you don't need gay panic defenses. All you need is a defense of like defending your children, defending your family, defending whatever vague cultural norms that you want to defend from. And then all of a sudden, engaging in that exact same behavior starts becoming a lot easier. And by that behavior, I mean murdering LGBT people.
Used in the polarization section over here is also being used as part of this preparation, I would say. Acts of genocide are disguised as self-defense. All of these things that are happening about trans people in the United States are kind of predicated on the idea that trans people are a threat to children, is the main thing.
All students students are welcome to utilize gender reassignment services today in the gym.
Notice the spooky music. Once again, a lot of right-wing propaganda is man, that jumped pretty far back, didn't it? Where are we at? Let's see. We were all the way right there. Yeah, there we go. So notice that a lot of the propaganda
Are
when it comes to right-wingers is very slickly produced. It's very slick. It's designed to trick people that don't know what they're looking at, or into actually having a moral panic, because like, oh my gosh, I literally when you first listen to the music, like the beat and stuff and the megaphone, it comes off sounding almost like a Purge movie. Think about that for a second. They're producing an ad for a political candidate to make you worried about the trans panic, and they're basically playing it to insinuate like that would make you might think of the Purge. Let's watch that again. And I want to know, and like later on, if you watch this, comment, because I know it's like very early in the morning now, so I'm not going to really draw anybody here. However, people that watch this later, let me know. Do you get the implication of the Purge when you first hear this ad?
kind of predicated on the idea that trans people are a threat to children is the main thing.
All students are welcome to utilize gender reassignment services
That's
today
the
in the
Purge.
gym.
It's the
This
Purge.
is confidential. Your parents will not be notified.
I'm Garrett Soldano, and I don't co-parent with the government.
Oh, I don't co-parent with the government. So now it's not just like trans kids recognizing their own gender identity. Now it's not the parents of trans kids that are also vouching for them. Now it's the government that has to be involved in trans kids and their parents. Like, they just can't help themselves but lump every single thing that they don't like into like one freaking box. I hate trans kids, and I hate LGBT people, and I don't like it when families are supportive or the government. So it all must, like that. It all has to be in one single nice box.
My pronouns, conservative, patriot.
Ooh, my pronouns are conservative and patriot. Ugh. Like, a lot of these people are so moronic. How many pronouns does your average cis person use? If you're cis, okay, and you say, oh well, my pronouns are he and him, like this doofus probably says. Okay, well let's think about that for a second. All right, so he and him, and then that would also be like I, me, one, them, they. If somebody is looking at him and doesn't know who they are, or if he calls someone they don't know who, all of these pronouns. If you look, there's a whole block of text of pronouns that people will use that are my, mine, right? All of these are pronouns for oneself. Ooh, oneself. Thy, thyself. That folks can use for themselves. There's like more than a dozen of them, and that's just for your average cis person. If they had to acknowledge what pronouns they use every one of them, but then they want to pretend that trans people saying like, actually, like myself, I don't use necessarily like whatever pronouns people would traditionally associate with me, and instead I prefer she, her. And they would say, that's outrageous, that's radical, that's whatever. But I mean, like, as opposed to your pronouns, I mean, like, I could make some mean jokes about this guy, but I'll abstain from doing so.
The woke groomer mafia wants to indoctrinate and
The woke groomer mafia. So now not only are we woke and not only are we groomers coming after children, but we are a mafia. Like also trying to tie us with some type of like criminal threat, criminal element as well. And I'm just like this language. I like how right wingers will insist that we're the ones indoctrinated when it's like, or that we have some type of ideology that we can't break. When this guy, who's a candidate, literally is like the groomer left wing mafia. Like, really?
subjugate our kids to their warped fantasies.
Subjugate our kids into their warped fantasies. And oh look, drag queen story hour, because they just can't help. I literally, any conservative that shows up later on and you got a problem with me or a problem with what you see right now? Can you articulate it? What is it? Is it because the person that you see, like, let's look at this real quick, okay? Like, they're wearing leggings. They've got a long-sleeved shirt on, a big-ass wig that covers up, like, most of their neck and shoulders. They're covered from head to toe. What's the fucking problem with this? Even from a conservative standpoint, that looks like they also like Poison Ivy in here cosplay, reading a story. What's the issue? Do you hate supervillains?
It's time to fight back.
Ooh, fight back. Flash it. Fight back. Yeah, they're not indoctrinating you for anything.
Governor, I'll turn Michigan into the parents' rights capital of America and transition Walt Whitmer out of office.
And transition woke Whitmer out of office. Yeah, okay.
Always bring up drag queen story hours. They're always like, oh my God, this public library brought all of these drag queens in and they're being weird around you know, like, okay, so they're propping up all of the things that they're doing against us as a type of self-defense. Or like, these transgenders are coming in and trying to take over women's sports.
Okay, once again, this is Future Zoe talking to past Luxander. Unfortunately, let's pop this up real quick. Unfortunately, since Lux made this video, let's shoot over here real quick, because guess what has happened since Lux made this video. So right here, tweet breaking FINA, so it's basically the worldwide international swimming organization, has banned transgender athletes from competing in women's elite races if they've gone through any part of male puberty. And this is Piers Morgan, known piece of shit. And the picture that they chose right here is Leah Thompson, along with the second place, well, I guess third place one or whatever. And I just want you to know, this is a forced perspective picture. All right, you're looking at somebody who's like 5 foot right here, like 5'7". And so these are like just short women, and Leah Thompson is like a woman of average height. Now she's a trans woman. She's been banned from competing in swimming, like just flatly banned, along with trans athletes. Now, let's shoot back over here real quick, back to Luxander. And by the way, Caitlyn Jenner totally supports this ban of transgender swimmers. Which and of course, like, oh well, I just want to make sure that I support women competing. I'm just like, so wait a minute, doofus over here, Caitlyn Jenner, that literally made her fame and money off of being a like gold medal runner, would not support other trans women being able to compete in any type of competition now, of course, because they're always like pulling the ladder up or kicking it over behind them. I just want to point out that it's absolutely disgusting that Caitlyn would do that. Once again, going after trans people for no reason. So I just wanted to pause Luxander here, because at the time this news headline broke, it's very depressing, because it does go right back into what Lux is talking about here, where this is once again segregating trans people away in a major way, categorically, from being able to compete in swimming at an elite level. Now, keep in mind, a lot of this genocidal rhetoric, every single aspect of society that they divide us off from, just imagine society as a whole, every section that they're cutting us out of, from like let's say like just sports competition, and you move it a little bit closer and closer and closer. The goal is to keep legislating us out of being able to compete in sports, to be able to compete in high school sports, to be able to use bathrooms. And it's going to keep going down and down and down as they're like, legally removing areas where we're allowed to be publicly, until we're all the way down into what? A camp that they want to put us in. And that's where all of this leads to, if you cannot, for some reason, use your intuition to see where it leads. Okay, that's why this is so dangerous, and you've got to pay attention to this. This is not about, I would argue, don't give an inch on any of this stuff. Push back and fight back every bit that you can, because we know where it leads. And it's not a slippery slope fallacy, okay? And you might be telling, oh, Zoe, that sounds like a slippery slope, and you're fear-mongering. The problem is, as we'll see as we go through this stream, we are not fear-mongering, and what we're talking about is a possible future if conservatives get their way. Back to you, Lux.
It's classic role reversal. Keep that shit in mind. This is Darvo. If anybody's not familiar with Darvo, it is a term to describe a manipulative behavior that is typically done in abusive situations, abusive relationships. DARVO stands for deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Like technically it's 3 steps. So deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. So if you were
it's playing the victim while also victim blaming at the same time. And people can do this on like an individual level, and they can do this as a group. And that's what Lux is getting at here.
To say like you are making laws that are preventing people from being able to, go to the bathroom, enact their rights the way that they're supposed to be able to, they will turn around and say like, no, we're not doing that. And even if I was doing that, it would be because you are a danger to children, like.
It's I'm protecting the kids, and I'm not doing it to harm you or your community. I'm only protecting the kids, and I don't see why you get so mad about that unless you are a victimizer of kids. And the only reason why you would oppose this is because you actually want to harm kids. That's why they say it.
They're like reversing who is even the one who's starting the problem. I just ran into this issue on Twitter where someone was like, I was like, listen, it's not like we create these laws protecting bathroom rights, like just because, like, we've been using the bathroom in the United States as trans people for decades, and it has not been a problem until laws are passed to restrict that. Or
and a lot of the laws that they pass to like target trans people specifically, ironically enough, end up affecting who the most? Cis women that are non-conventionally, skinny, pretty, whatever other metric that some misogynist prick wants to level at them, and end up holding like cis women hostage. This happened multiple times at this point, holding cis women hostage and saying that they have to like, wait there for like a cop or whoever to get there to like inspect them to make sure that they're supposed to be in that bathroom. This negatively affects women, perpetuates stereotypes way more than it will specifically harm the people it was intended to, trans people. Although trans people will definitely be hurt by bathroom bills and that sort of thing, especially school age, because at that point, a lot of the teachers have known the child before they start transitioning, and that's just garbage that they're able to abuse a child in that way.
Or some action is taken by the government to restrict that. And this person I was arguing with like insisted like, no, you started it with Grimm v. Virginia. And that's like a lawsuit that started in 2016. And I was like, first of all, the law in North Carolina limiting bathroom access passed in March of 2016. Second of all, what was the Grimm versus Virginia case about? Oh, it was the government schools saying you can't use the bathroom in the way that you're intending to as a trans person, and then he had to sue in retaliation right? Like that, like it was still that the government started it. And that's like something that people just fundamentally seem to not understand. The government is actually the one starting the bullshit, right? Like it's not like they're doing something to protect anyone.
Well, no. So that, all right. So I want to like hone in on this part, this point real quick. This is very important. A lot of these lawsuits, okay, the trans person or LGBT people are on the defense as somebody is trying to sue them, or the government is trying to sue them, or it's an LGBT person suing the government because of discrimination or because of some discriminatory law. Right? I want to make that clear. It's not like trans people are specifically going out and looking for lawsuits to go against the government or whatever else. This is a case where it ends up being like, hey, I'm being discriminated against. People like me are being discriminated against. This is not fair. And I'm going to therefore pursue, some type of legal charge in order to make change in the system, because I don't feel like being fined. I don't feel like being, arbitrarily arrested just because of some bullshit law. And I think that's what Lux is getting here at, right? It's not that trans people are specifically litigious, okay? It's the fact that we end up getting wrapped up in a lot of this stuff, wrangled into it, based on discriminatory laws, not because we actually want to go down there and talk to anybody in the damn justice system.
All of these states where laws are passing to restrict like participation in sports, for example, are states in which there is only one transgender student like enrolled in sports in the whole state. Keeping that in mind, like all that to...
Yeah, laws like in Idaho and stuff, where the state spent taxpayer money debating, writing law, and passing it, wasting that session, because in some of these areas, as Lex was saying, there was literally one trans person playing sports. One in the whole state. But that's what they want to focus on. And I just want to extrapolate that, by the way, to all of their other piss poor arguments. Just be aware, when they're fear-mongering about trans people, they're always talking about, just like they talk about that one athlete in an entire state, a lot of times they're talking less than 1% of the entire population in some states. And then of that 1%, you're talking only a percentage of that percentage that's actually engages in criminal behavior. But they want to pretend that the negative, negative aspects that exist within like every community or make up the whole of the community. And therefore, if you can find like a single trans person who engages in some illegal behavior, that ought to categorically apply to every single trans person. And I know that we don't engage in fallacious thinking like that or reasoning, right?
To say that what we're looking at here is acts of genocide disguised as self-defense. Like, oh, you trans people are the ones causing the problems. You know, you are the ones, whatever. We often use euphemisms. Hello again from Editing Lux. I didn't really know where this one fit in, so I'm just here to let you know that I have now seen video evidence of a political candidate explicitly calling for the execution of queer and trans people. It's not a euphemism, so it didn't really fit into the euphemism part. I'm not really sure where this is going to end up in the video, but here is the clip of this person saying this thing.
The LGBT.
All right, so this person, we're going to talk about them more later on. This is, you can see, it says Pastor Mark Burns. I want to be clear. Mark Burns has also been running for office in, I believe it's South Carolina, as a senator in the last election cycle and this election cycle. So keep in mind, the stuff that he says right now, he's saying while running for political office. And for those of you that are LGBT, but conservative leaning, or buy into the garbage that like Milo Yiannopoulos is peddling, like, oh, conversion therapy works for... Okay, I want you to listen to this man. Listen to Mark Burns. Believe him in what he says, because he absolutely would include you in any group that he includes LGBT. It doesn't matter to him whether you are conservative or you support his views, okay? I want to be clear. pastor, he believes, as a true believer in Christ, that LGBT people and their families deserve to be killed by the state. All right? Would you vote for this man? I just want to be clear. If your family's okay with you and you're like, well, I'm kind of a degenerate, but my family loves me and I'm still, I want to be clear. He wants you murdered. And he wants your family that supports you or lets you live there, he wants you shot in the back of the head.
Transgender grooming our children's minds is a national security threat because it is ultimately designed to destabilize the republic we call the United States of America. That's why when I'm elected, I don't want.
I'm so fucking glad that this guy lost his election. Not in a landslide. I mean, it's pretty much a landslide. I think he only got like 23% of the vote. It's still terrifying though. He got like almost a fourth of the vote. I mean, like, that's still, make of it what you will, but hey, a quarter of the people in South Carolina think that if you're gay and you're conservative, you and your family should be murdered.
I want to just vote. I want to start holding people accountable for treason to the Constitution. I am going to push to reenact.
Ooh, it's treason to be LGBT now. Treason.
HUAC. HUAC is the House of Un-American Activities Committee. It was a real committee that was formulated back in the 50s, and it's a committee that we should reenact that starts holding these people accountable for treason. We need to hold people for treason, start having some public hearings, and start executing people who are found guilty for their treasonous acts against the Constitution of the United States of America, just like they did back in 1776.
You know what, South Carolina? This is our guy.
Things.
All right, hold on for a second. There's so much that I want to say about this. So first of all, the lady there, that blonde lady that was clapping, the Fox News host looking lady, that was the lady that told Blair White that if she wanted to do something for conservatives on that conservative panel, that Blair White should grow her mustache out. That was the same lady. And remember, like, back then, I would say, like, yeah, that lady, like Blair White, is clearly like absurd for having those strange bedfellows, right? And they would like have her killed if they could. Now, I just want to ask for a second. When this guy says the House Un-American Committee that he wants to that he thinks should be reformed to, like, reconstituted explicitly to look into LGBT people and that sort of thing. So he said that it was the 1950s, right? So let's just take a look real quick at the oh, look, here's an article on the House Un-American Activities Committee, and let's see if it says what he said it does. So he said it was formed in the 1950s. So let's just read right here. House Committee of Un-American Activities, HCAU, also dubbed the House, whatever, was an investigative committee of the United States House of Representatives, so it's of the U.S. House of Representatives, created in the 1938. So that's not 1950s, dipshit. I'm not surprised that he doesn't even get his dates right, but like no surprise there. So 1938, to investigate alleged disloyalty and subversive activity on part of private citizens and public employees, these organizations with either of having either fascist or communist ties. Now, this is very popularly used against communists by McCarthy, okay? Joseph McCarthy. However, I find it kind of funny that it also includes fascists right here, which if you look at that guy's content, Mark Burns, he's definitely a fascist and would be found in violation of this. However, the committee's anti-communist investigations are often associated with McCarthyism. Although Joseph McCarthy himself, a U.S. Senator, had no direct involvement with the House Committee, McCarthy was the chairman of the Government Operations Committee and its permanent subcommittee on investigations of the U.S. Senate, not the House. Oh, I have a, let's see. Yeah, exactly, TARDIS. You didn't realize that you were a constitutional danger. Well, hold on. Let's see how much that holds true, right? Because if Mark Burns is correct, then being LGBT is basically like not all, we're all traitors, and that is the crime of high treason that he wants us all like prosecuted for and executed, by the way, which would be something like the Proud Boys. And he says he wants this committee to investigate it. So let's see the history of this committee real quick. I'm just going to go through its history real quick. So you can see like 1918, and you can go to Wikipedia and read all this. But let's just keep scrolling through here as like various cases standing. Hollywood blacklist. So, you know, it's popular for right-wingers to claim that Hollywood is all leftist and involved in all this, type of propaganda to kids and this sort of thing. But at the same time, they also hate the idea of government controlling corporations. But we can see right here in 1947, the committee held 9 days of hearings into alleged communist propaganda and influence in the Hollywood motion picture industry. After conviction on contempt of Congress charges for refusal to answer some questions posed by the committee, the, quote, Hollywood 10 were blacklisted by the industry. Eventually, more than 300 artists, too bad Dave Chappelle couldn't have been in there, including directors, radio commentators, actors, and particularly screenwriters, were boycotted by the studios. You can read all this if you want to, and it's all in the name of like anti-Soviet stuff. So this was this committee wielding its power to blacklist major actors and screenwriters and stuff in Hollywood. Okay, so absolutely using their power, and we see analogies to this with DeSantis going after Disney currently in 2022, trying to make sure that trying to deny Disney its sovereign area or whatever, the agreement that they had to let them have their own township and that sort of thing. DeSantis is absolutely wielding the power of the state to go after Disney. Once again, the state abusing private corporations, which Republicans and libertarians especially claim that they are against, but they are engaging anyway because they claim that they are woke. Let's continue on just a little bit. Okay, let's focus on the decline now. So this guy, Burns, wants to reinstate it, but let's look at the decline, okay? Why did it go away? In the wake of the downfall of McCarthy, who never served in the House nor on HUAC, the prestige of HUAC began a gradual decline in the 1950s. So dipshit, when he said that it was formed in the 1950s, it was actually formed, as we found out earlier, 1938. That's not 50. And then the 50s saw its decline, not when it was actually established. By 1959, the committee was being denounced by former President Harry S. Truman. So a former president in 1959 denounced this damn committee as, quote, the most un-American thing in the country today. And this is the thing, the committee that Mark Burns advocated being brought back to investigate LGBT people like myself to be executed for treason, for existing. Okay, let's continue on real quick. So let's see, in 1960, it held hearings which led to the infamous riot on May 13th. Hey, that's my birthday. When city police officers fire hosed protesting students from the UC Berkeley, Stanford, and other local colleges and dragged them down the marble steps beneath the rotunda, leaving some seriously injured. Does that sound familiar to anybody that might be watching this? Police abusing college students, dragging them down stone steps and permanently injuring some of them for just protesting a committee? Yeah, that doesn't sound anything like police would do in 2022. ACAB, by the way, totally ACAB. So Soviet affairs expert William Mendel, who had been subpoenaed to testify, angrily denounced the committee and the police in a blistering statement, which was aired repeatedly for years thereafter on Pacifica radio station KPFA in Berkeley. An anti-communist propaganda film, Operation Abolition, was produced by the committee and subpoenaed local news. It seems like this was very popular in the 1960s, 61. Okay, so absolutely. The committee lost considerable prestige in the 1960s, progressed, increasingly becoming the target of political satirists and the defiance of a new generation of political activists. Okay, we absolutely need a new generation of political activists, okay? When you look at me, I don't want you to see like a trans woman wearing a masquerade mask and some sexy clothing, okay? I don't want you to just see that, okay? Look at me as a political activist. That's what I'm doing. That's what, if you can hear my voice, okay? I want you to be politically engaged. Vote and vote and vote. I know electoralism seems hopeless. I know it seems like there's no real change, okay? Change happens slowly and over time. And this absolute absurd committee that used to convict people for fucking treason, for being like too far leftist, being a Soviet adjacent, whatever you want to say, okay? It was dismantled because of police brutality against protesting college students. That's what ultimately led to this, okay? I know it seems hopeless. I know it seems like when BLM is being confronted by police and they're being battered or whatever else, and it seems like there's nothing we can do. Those protests matter, okay? Protesting against police, protesting against violence, protesting against this does work. The point and getting and protesting and risking getting arrested, risking getting beaten up, okay? Martin Luther King understood this. Every major civil rights activist group has understood this. It's unfortunate that they will do violence against us, but it is worth standing up against the system. However, I do like this guy, Mandel over here, right? Didn't that guy sound kind of based? He's like, yeah, blistering speech that he delivered against this the House Un-American Committee, and it was actually like popular enough that it was played in like colleges and stuff and radio stations around the country to say like, holy shit, like we need to be aware of this guy. If only we had his speech against the government. Oh wait, we have the internet Wayback Machine. We actually have his testimony. Wait, look. Oh, wait.
William Mandel. I live at 233 Lake.
So this guy, William Mandel, we are going to listen to his testimony against HUAC, which is what Mark Burns wanted to bring back to persecute LGBT people. Let's see what he has to say.
Berkeley.
And every single leftist, okay, if you can hear my voice, you need to listen, like watch this performance. This is what you need to do. Do you see the guy next? So Mandel is this guy, and the glasses right there, the dark ones, and he's got the dark, well, the buzzed haircut right here. Okay, the guy sitting behind him or adjacent to him in that bow tie right there is his lawyer. Okay, lawyer the fuck up. Don't do this crap of like, oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to like fight the system by myself. Okay, find you a leftist lawyer. Find you a lawyer that agrees with your free speech or whatever your politics are at the time that you are facing a committee like this. Get a lawyer. You can say all the stuff that Mandel wants to, but make sure that you have a lawyer to represent you, okay? Do not go in by yourself if possible.
By occupation, I am a translator of scientific material, a lecturer, a leader of travel tours, an author, radio and television commentator, and have been a newspaper man at various times until committees such as this made it difficult for me to continue in some of these fields.
Okay, so an author, a writer, he's been a lecturer, a presenter, a teacher. He sounds like he's pretty fucking knowledgeable, and he also is doing a radio show host, right? Now, I'll say like yours truly is definitely not as prestigious as he would be, but he wasn't able to continue his practice, and for a long time he's being persecuted by the government for supposed Soviet sympathies.
Say, not facetiously, but in earnest appraisal, you're certainly engaged in a number of activities here. You're appearing today in response to a subpoena which is heard upon you by this committee?
I do.
And you're represented by counsel?
I am. To the degree that a counsel not able to speak for me can represent me.
All right, to the degree that a counsel who cannot represent me can speak for me. All right, just pay so close attention to this. He's setting it up so perfectly. So he's already saying that this counsel in the way that he's allowed to represent me legally cannot represent me in the way that I fully should be. So every step that he's saying, everything that he is, if you're talking Fifth Amendment stuff, he is not only being care to make sure that nothing is self-incriminating, but at the same time he's taking jabs at this committee.
Could you kindly identify yourself, please, Consul?
Bert Ramirez, Oakland, California.
By the way, if the television men want some music, put those lights on.
I think he was suggesting a word.
They can put them on if they want something to show their audiences. Fine. You might miss something.
I understand you want the lights on?
I want the lights on, precisely. I want the fullest glare of publicity in this committee's activity.
So they're asking if he wants the lights on when he says that he wants them as turn up as bright as possible so that they can see, everyone can see what's going on, just like in my little studio right here. And he basically is making a reference to he wants it's a kind of a meme in the left that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Okay, this is honestly the more that you force people to just be out and open, the more that you're able to transparently investigate them, the more that you're able to see their activities. Think of I don't know, a disgraced former twice impeached one-term president. Okay, the more transparent that their actions and their activities were, the more obvious and blatant it is of their crimes. So he's insinuating here, I just love it. He's like, yeah, I want there to be as much light. Yeah, I'll turn the lights up as much as possible because I have nothing to hide. And my whole point in being here in this testimony is going to be to reveal what a joke the HACU or HUAC is. And by the way, like before any of you comment that, oh, I don't like, it's not a video moving around, it's not in color, it's just an old black and white photo and stuff like this. Like 1959, okay? 1959. So we're talking like 62 years ago. You need to know this history. You need to listen carefully for what's said here, because this is stuff that happened in court before this committee that was decommissioned and that people like Mark Burns want to bring back. You need to know this stuff, okay? Because whenever people bring this up, they say we ought to do, HA or HUAC, you need to have an answer for not only why we should not do that type of thing, but also the fact that, hey, are you aware that, William Mandel's testimony against that very organization? You need to know this sort of thing.
Where and when were you born, please, sir?
I was born in New York City on June 4th, 1917.
Okay, so I appreciate you, man, and I appreciate you saying that you would do whatever you can to stop people like that pastor, but you need to know that it's not just that pastor. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's Lauren Boebert. It is what's the name? Josh Hawley, okay? It's Ted Cruz. It's all of those cronies, and that trickles down to their supporters. Because remember, they're not the only ones that have seats in the Senate. If they wanted to pass sweeping reform to reestablish HUAC or something like that, they could not do it without other Republican senators, other Republican House of Representatives voting with them, okay? It's not just enough to oppose them and not vote for them, which I would say I'm glad that you've came to that conclusion. You cannot risk your life and the life of your family by voting for Republicans until this cancer is cut out of that party.
Give us a word about your education.
Yes, sir. I was educated in the public schools, junior high schools, and high schools in New York City. I had one semester in biochemistry at the age of 14 at the University of Moscow, USSR. I specify my age so no nonsense about the Lenin School can be asked of me. I then had 1 year at City College in New York. I was expelled for opposition to military training in 1933 at age 16. In 1947, the Hoover Institute at Stanford University engaged me as a fellow at postdoctoral stipend on the basis of 2 books I had written for the specific purpose of compiling an encyclopedia of the USSR. This is my education.
So unlike Jordan Peterson, okay, Mandel establishes here that he opposed war from a very early age, at the age of 16. He's very well educated. He was educated in the USSR at the time, which, I mean, the whole point of this committee is to root out Soviets. So I would, or people that are sympathetic to them. So I would assume, just like this court probably did, that if you've got somebody who studied over in Russia and has written 2 books primarily about like the USSR and that sort of thing, and what could be described as like being sympathetic to, I don't know, the Soviets, then of course they would want to pull this guy in to investigate him or talk about him. Now he's also, so he wrote 2 books about it. He also established his age. He's a lot older, so that can't be this, oh, well, in youth, you're easily tricked and you're easily deceived and that sort of thing. You don't know anything. He is establishing that he is a lot older at this time. He is not young. He is very well educated. He also was a teacher at a prestigious university. He's not a nobody, okay? There's a lot of propaganda. They'll say, oh, well, when people are young and easily influenced, they just don't know any better, okay? Not in his case.
Are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Communist Party?
Sir, I am 42 years of age and have never had to face a jury as defendant or grand jury as witness in my life. My research and writing have been so public that 2 committees similar to this one, the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee and the McCarthy Committee, subpoenaed me as far back as 8 and 7 years ago, respectively, for having written a book titled The Soviet Far East and Central Asia. No indictment resulted from those hearings either, or from my continued public speaking or writing since that date. Clearly, therefore, I have committed no crime under any of the laws of this country and am not engaged in subversion. Consequently, I refuse to testify on the grounds that as a radio and TV public affairs broadcaster active in those capacities today, the subpoena issued to me interferes with the rights of my stations to schedule informational programs on their merits, and is thus a direct violation of the First Amendment guarantee of freedom of speech and of the people's right to hear. Further, as a scholar with a 20-year record of research and public writing and lecturing in my chosen field, the study of the Soviet Union, a field admitted by all to be one in which this country is in vital need of knowledge, I refuse to testify on the grounds that the subpoena is a violation of freedom of inquiry, which can only be expressed with the free speech and free press guaranteed in the First Amendment to the academic community as to all others. Lastly, I certainly shall not answer questions representing allegations against me made by persons not present and not identified, whom I cannot confront and whom my lawyer cannot cross-examine as to their truthfulness. To rest my case solely on the First Amendment would, as 36 cases now in the courts show, condemn me to years of court action at enormous cost. It would cost me my home and impoverish my family for a very long time to come, which of course is what this committee desires.
Okay, so he's lost his home. He has been impoverished. He's lost everything. Fighting these cases, fighting these lawsuits. He's already testified at 2 other committees, including the fucking McCarthy committee, okay? When you hear right-wingers complaining about being censored and, freedom of speech and stuff like that, okay? They're talking about being banned for violating something like Twitter's TOS of saying the N-word towards somebody, okay? Where, like, they've already signed an agreement that they would not do that. It's a private company, okay? This is what First Amendment censorship actually looks like. This is the government bankrupting your entire life because they're saying that you support something or you talk about something that they deem inappropriate. And it was very clearly and very obvious a violation of his First Amendment rights to publish what he wanted to, talk about what he wanted to on his radio shows, and associate with whoever he wanted to. So the free association, the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, all that sort of thing, that is what happens. This is a gross violation of this when you have spy organizations used against American citizens like the HUAC that Mark Burns, who would totally claim that he's a free speech advocate for, would support. Now, I don't know if some of these other dickheads like Crowder, Shapiro, Peterson, or any of the others would support something like the HUAC. I highly suspect that they might be amicable toward it as long as it did not investigate the wrong type of people. And by the wrong type of people, they'd be conservatives. As long as they're investigating leftists, communists, or Soviet sympathizers, or LGBT people, they would be perfectly fine with it. I want you, as many times as you need to, go back and listen to this video and listen to the testimony that he just gave. That's being canceled. That's being censored. He doesn't have a voice because he's been bankrupted. He's only here. This recording is only there because the state thought this would make them look good in going after him.
Therefore, I also refuse to testify under my right not to be a witness against myself, a right originated to protect the innocent. The guilty can be convicted by the testimony of others if there is any real evidence to present.
Do you honestly apprehend, sir, that if you told this committee truthfully while you're under oath whether or not you are now this instant or ever have been a member of the Communist Party, you would be supplying information which might be used against you in a criminal proceeding?
Honorable beaters of children and sadists uniformed and in plain clothes. Distinguished Dixiecrat wearing the clothing of a gentleman.
Dixiecrat wearing the clothing of a gentleman. Notice he also calls out the police wearing a uniform sadist beater of children. Police, listen to this. You need to understand this rhetoric. This is what being a fucking based pog champ looks like in front of a committee designed to put him in prison.
Eminent Republican who opposes an accommodation with the one country with which we must live at peace in order for us all and our children to survive. My boy of 15 left this room a few minutes ago in sound health and not jailed, solely because I asked him to be in here to learn something about the procedures of the United States government and one of its committees. Had he been outside where the son of a friend of mine had his head split by these goons operating under your orders, my boy today might have paid the penalty of permanent injury or a police record for desiring to come here and hear how this committee operates.
All right, a cab right fucking there. So one of his friend's sons had his head cracked open, presumably in the riot that had led up to protests and everything else. Meanwhile, he wants his son to be there to witness what he's saying is like, you know, procedures or whatever within the government. I want every one of you to listen to this and to recognize procedures in the government. Specifically, why you should have a lawyer, the history of this country, the way that HUAC has been abused, and knowing our history. Okay, when people say that they're afraid of their First Amendment speech being infringed upon or being silenced, this is what you should be thinking of and not fucking Twitter.
If you think that I am going to cooperate with this collection of Judases, of men who sit there in violation of the United States Constitution, if you think I will cooperate with you in any way, you are insane.
Now, sir, were you a lecturer?
Notice that he absolutely fucking gets applause for that. Totally fucking boss shit.
Were you a lecturer in the California Labor School in San Francisco in 1947?
Yes, sir, I was. And I lectured on Shostakovich's oratorio, Song of the Forest. What do you know about that?
And were you were you at that time a member?
This, by the way, this is who Jordan Peterson wishes he was. When he was talking about, like, he was fear-mongering about Bill C-16 and talking about he'd have his free speech taken away. Then if he didn't gender students correctly, they would come and drag him out of his house in handcuffs. This man is who Peterson wishes that he could be. And just for the record, Jordan Peterson would not be fit, in my opinion, to carry the jock strap of Daddy Mandel here, okay?
Of the Communist Party, and did you lecture as a communist?
As I told you before, sir, if there are laws on the books of this country under which any of the activities in which I have engaged publicly and openly, and I would be delighted to bring you a list of books literally this long, which either I have written or which have been cited as authority in books written years later in other countries, or journals to which I have contributed. If any of this public record, almost all of it scholarly, by anybody's definition, is to be regarded or were regarded by anyone as criminal activity, there are laws on the books under which the proper authorities of the United States could have taken or could now take action against me. I have never disappeared from my home. I have been available at all times. This question has no purpose other than to harass me.
So you know where I was, motherfucker. I've been at my house the entire time just chilling. And the whole reason this question is nothing but harassment. Absolutely. The entire reason for committees like this to exist is to endlessly harass people, endlessly pull them into court, to bankrupt them, to make their lives absolutely miserable, so that you would never dream of living outside of the America that they say you must live this way. Okay. It's not about you being censored about your freedom of speech. None of that stuff actually matters to them. What matters to them is that people that they don't like go to prison or bankrupt their lives fighting to stay out of jail. Meanwhile, your average cis-het nationalist, white nationalist, gets to just live their life under the rule of the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the insane Lauren Boeberts out there, while they have their pseudo freaking philosophers like Peterson talking about how Jesus would have really liked this. It reminds me. I'll get to Peterson later. It's fine. I think
when I was asked this
done
question
here.
last in 1943 by the late Joe McCarthy.
He was asked this in 1943. So don't talk about, the HUAC was put together in the 1950s, okay? This dude has been fighting this garbage since like before 43. And this is, I think 59?
And let me say that I am honored when people come up to me on the streets, perhaps I don't deserve this honor, and say, "You're the man who killed Joe McCarthy." Because I happened to appear on the first day of the book burning hearing, and I did my best to conduct myself in the manner which I'm conducting myself today. If there were any such evidence against me under any law, the proper authorities could move against me. This body is improperly constituted. It is a kangaroo court. It does
A kangaroo court. God. Yes.
not have my respect. It has my utmost contempt. And I am not going to answer that question, sir.
Do you have...
Proceed.
I'll answer that question with D's.
Do you have present information respecting the operation of the criminal conspiracy dedicated to the overthrow of this government by force and violence, which criminal conspiracy is represented on American soil in part by that entity known as the Communist Party?
He's talking to his lawyer.
My
That's why
answer
you always
is
have a
no,
lawyer.
sir, and I'm not...
That's why you have a lawyer. Based. Checking with the lawyer. Is this shut the fuck up Friday? Is this shut the fuck up Saturday? Does the day end in a Y? Do I need to shut the fuck up now?
How many ways you answer that question will remain the same.
All right, sir. Do you have present information respecting the activities of the Communist Party in Northern California?
Would you kindly define what you mean by present information, sir? You mean, do I read books or newspapers? I read
Do
books
you
or
know
newspapers.
from personal
Oh, could you define it? See, Peterson wishes he was this good.
experience in closed Communist Party meetings, the identification of persons who, to your certain knowledge, are now or in the recent past have been members of the Communist Party active in Northern California?
My answer is no, and if I did, I would not tell you.
My answer is no. And if I did, I would not tell you. I love it. So we're gonna okay. So can we just establish for the record, William Mendel, like, totally based, and every single leftist, like, you need to be like, don't hate lawyers. Find lawyers that are sympathetic to your cause, and lawyer the fuck up in this case. And if anybody talks about the HUAC, we absolutely need to oppose this garbage. We absolutely need to fight against it. And we're going to hop back now to Luxander. Sorry for that, like, entire detour and, like, through history. I just wanted to, I felt like since Mark Burns had come up and he was talking about, I thought it'd be funny to pause the video and say, let's actually investigate what the, HAUC was and what the hell it was all about. Like when was it established? Was it established in 1950? No, it wasn't. And then, like, what led to the downfall? And then it's like, oh, this guy and this riot that happened. And then it's like, okay, well, who's this guy? And let's see what he had. It's like, oh, there's testimony. Let's listen to that. So hopefully you learned a little bit of history and you kind of see why history can be fun sometimes, kids. All right, so back to you, Lux.
Things have just gotten a little bit real. Victims are identified because of their ethnicity or religion, and death lists are drawn up.
So when Mark Burns says something like, we need to have the HUAC, what do you think the HAUC, under his guidance, or these Trumpist Republicans, what do you think, who do you think they would be putting on their lists? Do you think that they'd be drawing up, like, suspected communists or something like that? Or do you think that they would probably include trans people and LGBT people who they've already said that they want to see destroyed? They've already compared us to groomers, and they've already compared us to diseases, okay? What do you think's going to happen when they create an organization to make lists of the unsavory types? I think we would be included.
People are sometimes segregated into ghettos, deported or starved, and
so redlining, talking about mass deportation, which they've already done, or talking about, basically like sending LGBT people or whoever they don't agree with to specific bases.
And property is often expropriated.
Okay, so I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but before gay marriage was legalized, there was a huge problem where, like, two gay people would be together. One of them might die off, but because they couldn't be married, they did not have joint ownership of that property. There could only be one person listed as, like, the owner of the house that they shared. After the partner, partner could pass away, that just so happened to be the partner that was the primary owner, that meant that the housing and stuff by the will should go to their partner, right? No. The family could step in, family that has disowned them, that has treated them like garbage, abused them their entire lives, never spoken to them in like 20, 30 years, could just randomly show back up. In the law states, challenge the right to that property and that house. And there were plenty of cases, especially in conservative areas, where the abusive family members were awarded that property. Then the spouse of this person that's lived with them their entire lives ends up being homeless in their last years of their lives. It's absolutely disgusting. However, there were other states where, guess who gets the property and stuff if there's no family to claim it? The state. That could file a dispute and say, well, you were never legally married. you don't own this property, and unless you can purchase the property, and of course, they also get no inheritance from that person in their will, because that could also be challenged by the family, and in some states, the state itself. So just keep in mind, over and over, there is a long established history. If you are LGBT, if you are a gay person, if you are bi, or you happen to be in that any type of queer relationship, just know that if you are a conservative, if you're supporting conservatism, if you're supporting this party like the Blair Whites and stuff like that, unless you are making like literally millions so that you can afford to just move anywhere in the country or even leave the country, you are literally shooting yourself in the foot by voting for these people. They will eradicate you if they can. They don't care if you're the good one or the nice one, or you get along with them, or you do what they, oh, look, you're just the nice one that you just want to buy a house and you just want to live with your spouse and y'all want to like, go to work and contribute to society, and you do nothing weird. You don't even want to adopt kids. You don't do anything that some people might want to do. No, you will still be thrown along with everybody else right into these segregated neighborhoods and then right into the camps.
Genocidal massacres begin. This, I think we're not quite to this point. However, I would say that we're getting rather close to it. And the reason why I would say that is because we have the law in Texas that recently passed about like, oh, letting your kid do hormones is child abuse, like under currently existing law. So we don't even have to make a new law that says it's child abuse. Like victims are being identified. So I would say we're not quite at this point. This
also in Texas, there is the law that like hospitals, medical facilities, any area that might support trans youth, if a trans person shows up there and they're being treated, they're supposed to report that to the state. They are, in fact, starting to create lists or keep track of these kids and their families.
This is basically the next step though. And it's different in different parts of the country. You know, not every state has laws that are falling under these previous steps, you know. It's kind of a slow rollout. It's kind of like when Facebook has like an update to their whole website, but only certain people get access to it at a time. Yeah.
It's more of the fact that this is not wholly supported by a large enough percentage of that political party. But now most of the conservatives are supporting, like they're a couple steps behind. And there's a small fraction of them that are trying to move further ahead. But it's never the ones that are further behind pulling the ones that are further ahead back and saying, hey, this is a bit too far. Instead, what you see is the conservatives that are like, up here with their abuse, and the conservatives that are on the other side being dragged up to where they're at. They will continue to do this until we stop them, preferably by voting and spreading information, making people aware of this sort of thing so they stop supporting conservatives. Just stop it.
And Loopy points out it's worth noting that these steps can be independent of each other and happen simultaneously. It's just this is kind of designed in a way to describe like an escalation of severity of behavior. So because we have persecution, and then the next step is extermination. And extermination is the hate group murders their identified victims in a deliberate and systematic campaign of violence. Millions of lives have been destroyed or changed beyond recognition through genocide. So this is, persecution is like people are fucking in camps and deported and starved, and property is removed from their possession. Like their homes are repossessed, or their cars are.
Yeah, you talk about, so Tardis says that they have several friends that are thinking about leaving Texas or looking at leaving Texas because of the laws that were passed there. I don't blame them. I've told every trans person and every LGBT person that I talk to that every single one of us needs to start planning on how to get out of the states that we live in. I live in a red state. So depending on how the midterms go, my spouse and I will be leaving the state. and we'll be relocating to a blue state where hopefully we'll gain some sanctuary while we start planning on possibly like leaving the country. It is just a sad fact that things are escalating, and the very fact that so many people within our own communities don't see it coming. Right? I don't want to be the last ones to leave when this step happens. All right? There is a window of time that you have, and the window of time that I would point to is the next presidential election. I know it's frightening. I know it sucks. But right now the midterms is like going to be like the last alarm bell going off. Because if it goes in the Republicans' favor and they basically take the House and the Senate, Trump barely lost the last election. It was only, he did lose soundly, but I don't know. It was still too close for me. You're talking like within 10 to 11,000 votes. If the next candidate, let's say a DeSantis, who's already passing like tons of anti-trans stuff in Florida, including going after Disney, so he's not afraid of using state authority to go after businesses, gets power, and they have the House and they have the Senate. We already know they have the Supreme Court. And with the January 6th hearings coming out now and all the stuff, we know that Jeannie Thomas, along with her husband Clarence, all right, Clarence is on the Supreme Court. And he's married to an activist that was working like with the Trump campaign. So Roe v. Wade is getting overturned any day now. And after that, they will go for Obergefell. So that'll overturn gay marriage. So you'll no longer be able to be married if you're gay. Then they're going to move on to probably target interracial marriage. They're going to try to roll back civil rights back to the 1950s. But with the propaganda, as in the 50s, focused so much on LGBT, specifically gay men, being these pederasts along with trans people, we are facing a true extermination. You're talking cultural extermination, where we just will not be present anymore because we will be outlawed from being in specific areas, from competing in sports. Millions of lives have been destroyed or changed beyond recognition through genocide. Do you know how many trans people that I know that cannot afford to move right now or cannot afford to leave their state because of the state of the economy, because of the fact that a lot of them have to work low-wage jobs, because they're discriminated against systemically, and their lives are going to be largely impacted or ruined by having to just get up and leave and try and start all over again in an area where they have even less support and less people that care about them while they're being persecuted systemically. This, millions of lives in the U.S. will probably be like, a few million. It's like 3 million people will probably be displaced and ruined by that as far as trans people alone. Not even moving to what we're looking at, like 25% of the population is LGBT in general. Yeah. Yeah. So in the chat, Tara said panic marriage. I mean, it's the future is very, very scary right now. I would say just try to steel your jaw and as much as possible and start making plans. And at the very end of this, I'm going to talk about some ideas that I have that might be able to help out trans people. And men, when you say this is why you need actual trans people, at what point that I've been going through this and that you've been listening to this, have you heard Mark Burns or any of these other people say actual trans people are not the issue? It's the transgenders or the fake transes, okay? No one has said that. They don't care if you are a trender or a real trans person. They don't care if you're a little gay or bisexual, pansexual, or if you're like really just a full-on gay, okay? To these people that are doing this, the extermination portion and these other steps, they don't care how true to your identity you are being. And I need you to understand this, because for some reason you feel like there's an exemption for the right kind of gay or the right kind of trans. That's not true. And if you go back and you look at Nazi Germany and you see what happened then, yes, there were actual Jews that worked alongside the Nazis initially. But you know what happened to all of those people, even the wealthy ones and the ones that did everything that the party said and collaborated as much as possible? They still ended up in the fucking camps too. So there's nothing that will exempt you. If you are LGBT, you will be on their lists. I'm just telling you. Don't delude yourself into thinking that you're the right kind. And as Mark Burns says, your family will be there with you for supporting you and not putting you out or betraying you.
Taken away. So once you get to extermination, stage 9, they're not just in the camps. They're now being gassed, you know, like they're not just in labor camps. They're being actively killed at this point. And like, you know, obviously at this point, people have like become political refugees and stuff, like very serious time. And then we have denial. Stage 10, the perpetrators or later generations deny the existence of any crime. Evidence is destroyed and witnesses are intimidated. There has been an increase in Holocaust denial online in recent years. Like, I will say the one good thing about Germany post World War II is that they buckled down a bit and they were like, no, like this was serious. We have Holocaust memorials everywhere. We don't want this to be a repeat for Germany. So, you know, they didn't do so much of the denial stuff back in the day, or at least like in the couple decades after, you know, like it's been kind of more recent that there have been increased denial of the Holocaust having happened, like this conspiracy theory type shit going on. But yeah, I just wanted to make it totally clear to everyone that this is very much like, okay, keeping in mind, we have gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I feel that it's been pretty demonstrably clear. And then stage 8 is the one where they start actively killing people. Like, to be completely clear, according to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust.
All right. And I definitely would agree that we are right now between stage 7 and stage 8. And when you look at like the FINA thing that just passed, where they're like, oh, we're going to outright ban trans people from competing in swimming now. This is the start of we're going to start banning you from these areas of society. And then if bathroom bills pass, they'll start banning us from more and more areas. And as they ban more, and then you'll see attacks on pride festivals increase in frequency. You'll see trans people or gay people, especially if depending on how the midterms go, and then especially if the midterms go Republican enough, I guarantee you will see a lot more gay panic murders start happening as people start claiming that they just panicked or whatever else. They didn't know that, you know, this guy just came on to me and I just had to kill him. You'll start seeing that, and courts will start allowing that again. There might even be like some, you know, landmark case to overturn, or states just might overturn their, you know, the Anti-Discrimination Act will be pushed back at the Supreme Court level. It'll just be done away with. I mean, Obama didn't even sign it until 2007, 2008. Once that's done away with, you can start reenacting gay panic defenses for murdering LGBT people. Now, men, I cannot tell you how much I disagree with you on this, okay? When you say actual trans people, you mean people that have fully trans. No, you're just basically you're taking a trans medicalist point. These people don't care about that. They don't care what stage of transition you are. They don't care if you just identify as trans and you haven't done any transition at all. They don't care if, like myself, I've been on HRT. They don't care about any of that stuff. To them, we are all just trans, okay? They will put Blair White in a cart right next to me and right next to you and ship us all out together, because to them, there is no good. I know this is going to be like difficult to hear, they don't care about you. They are going to try to do the same thing to you that they would do to me and that they would do to Blair White and that they would do to anybody else who you might point to as a transgender or something like that. Because to them, when they're this extreme, they don't care about nuances, about the difference in a trans medicalist versus a self-ID type of thing. For them, if you are LGBT, they're going to stamp a pink triangle on you and send you off or do whatever they're going to do with you, okay? Now, I don't want to end this segment on anything like just this grim. So I want to talk about some things real quick that we can do to protect ourselves from this, okay? Obviously, as I said before, oh, I know. If Blair, yeah, right. That's like the saddest thing. I'm like, hey, look, if you're going to like put a bullet in me or I get the wall, don't put me between like Blair White and Caitlyn Jenner, please. I want to have more dignity than that, right? Sorry. What I would say is so first let's look at the obvious thing. This is not going to happen everywhere all at once. This is going to be more of like red state type of thing. Obviously, we see like rumblings of it in Texas. We can look at Florida. We can look at like any of these like Republican strongholds where they're passing like anti-trans stuff right now. And if you go to the maybe I hold on, let me pull this up real quick. So a handy website to go to is the ACLU on anti-trans or anti-LGBT legislation, right? Let's see here. Okay, here we go. So if you go to their website, this is what it's going to look like. If you go down, you can view the current session of bills, okay? Anti-LGBTQ bills, and specifically anti-trans bills. And hopefully, if you don't believe me, or you think I'm exaggerating on any of this, okay? There's hundreds, like well over 100 at this point. And you can go down here, you can see Alabama, and you can start in alphabetical order. You can see right here the bill number. Then when you click on any one of these links, okay, it's going to pull up a brief description of the bill. Then over here, you can see the status of the bill. Now, thankfully, some of them have died, but as you see, like on these, delivered to governor on 4/7/2022, current year, okay? Read for the second time, 1/11/2022, okay, referred to committee. And you can go down and check all these different states, and this is like just segment by segment. So restricting healthcare. So taking away our healthcare, these bills. How about single-sex facility restrictions? So bathroom restrictions. That's all this little cluster of bills right here. Going down here, excluding transgender youth from athletics. So what FINA just did and banning trans people from swimming at the elite level. Now we have, look at this, all these fucking bills to ban youth. And in some of these states, it's one person that they were passing these bills for. But look at this. Look how many bills there are about sports. Look at that. And some of them are targeting one person. All of that for one trans girl. Like, holy crap, y'all. All right. Other school or curriculum restrictions. So this would be like the don't say gay stuff. And we can look at all the, all right? I'm not exaggerating when I talk about legislation, religious exemptions, restrictions on accessing accurate ID. Okay? This is not a joke. The state is using its power, LGBT equality bills, okay? So this is like bills preempting local protections. So at this point, you can go and see bills where they're trying to protect LGBT people. And you can look down here and go through all that stuff. The problem is, like other good bills, right? It's not that there aren't people trying to pass these bills. The problem really is Republicans obstructing this. And that's really that's why the midterms are so important. Okay, you can scroll through that list and you can see all the bills that are aimed as anti-trans bills. You can see what they're all about. Then you can see the section that is pro-LGBT and pro-trans people. Okay, and pro like gay, everything else. The problem is a lot of those bills are going to hinge on the way that the midterms go. The midterms and the presidency, right? If the midterms go, I mean, better than we can expect, then hopefully as the tide kind of shifts as far as like the general view on LGBT people, a lot of the bills that are anti-trans and anti-LGBT might fail or have less of a chance of passing. And then the bills that are to protect us, hopefully we'll get more of those actually passed. But if the midterms go really bad, which I mean they could, you'll see a lot of those anti-bills pass, and a lot of the bills that were to protect us fail, except for in states that are blue strongholds. And that's why I was saying before that like I don't like electoralism specifically. Like I still feel like the Democrats, like, I mean, they've done so little to protect us, but they are not the ones that are trying to pass those bills, okay? And that makes a huge difference, because it might make the difference to a lot of LGBT people's lives to have a little bit of extra time where we say, oh, the Democrats aren't going to really change anything. All they're going to do is like slow the Republicans down from passing all of those things. That's fine. Vote for them. They're not going to actively persecute us. And even if all they do is act as a Band-Aid, that will give however many more trans people, how many more LGBT people time to get the resources to get the hell out of those red states and get to blue states that might offer them sanctuary. Because ultimately, what you need to do, and this is like the first step that I would suggest for any trans person or LGBT people right now, if it's possible, okay? Start making plans to leave your state if it is a red state and get to a blue state, preferably one that has other blue states around it, to the west coast if possible. Otherwise, move up north toward New York and that area up there. Because, and this is like, I can't stress this enough, if you can get to Washington or Oregon, not only do you have your protections in like Portland and stuff like that, on the other side you've got New York, and then maybe like, I think it was Missouri. One of those states offered some of the protections. If you can get that far, that might give you another couple of years as the federal government, if there is like a hostile presidency where they are overturning all of these like national protections for you, the Equality Act, or not the Equality Act, but the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Act, okay? Even if those are overturned, the state itself that you're in, if it's a blue state, might still offer you protections or slow down some of the oncoming bigotry. From that point, you can start making plans to flee the country to wherever. Now, for safety reasons, I don't want to say specifically like where I necessarily would go myself. But I would say that if you're up north, especially in Portland or New York, I mean, Canada is very close by. And hopefully, you could easily seek like political asylum there. And you're already close enough to kind of like move over the border there if need be. And so that is one way that you can go. So number one, get to a blue state, period. Number two, start making community, make connections with other LGBT people, other trans people. I don't care if you have to do this just on Twitter, if you do it on Discord, if you've got family that you haven't talked to in like some time, if it's via Facebook, whatever, maybe reach out to them, start talking with them, kind of like see how they're doing and test the waters a little bit if they are in a blue state, or if they're close enough to one, like what their politics are. If you haven't talked to them in a while, maybe you'd be surprised that they're progressive. Obviously, if they end up being like a Trumpist or something, you can just go back to being kind of like just vaguely gone as like a family member. But if you find out that they have progressive politics, you might start talking with them about other politics, and then eventually start bringing up stuff like how you're frightened about the current state of affairs, and like you might need to leave, the state that you're in, if things become threatening enough, right? These are all things that you can think about. Not only is it family, but you could also think about friends that you haven't talked to since middle school or whatever else, right? It's possible that old friends that you have are also progressive, or maybe moved somewhere to a more progressive area. Let's see. Yeah, see right there. So, exactly, TARDIS. I understand. When you say like you're looking at that right now, you hate leaving your family. Find out if you've got family in other states. Find out if you've got like some uncle or some cousins that you might not know about. So instead of having to like leave your family entirely, you might find that you've got like a progressive uncle, or you've got some cousins or something that moved somewhere out west that you might be able to stay with. Check Facebook friends and stuff that you grew up with in school. Maybe some of those people are more progressive and moved out there. Okay. That's the first part of what I'm suggesting. Friends, family, because obviously like those would be connections that you have right away. The other thing, start joining Twitter communities, whether this is trans communities, whether it's LGBT communities. Follow as many trans people as you can. Follow as many like pro LGBT people, specifically within our community. Okay. I would not suggest to go out and just follow like anyone that just like lists themselves as a political activist. Specifically seek out members of the community that are as closely similar to you as possible in politics and everything else. That's on Twitter, on Instagram, on Discord, right? Start making community. Start getting to know people. You don't have to tell them your life story. You don't have to tell them where you're at or what you're worried about, but just start making connections, no matter how kind of vague they are. Then just over time, like make sure you just like tweet out every now and then, just like tweets, maybe comment back and forth to people, so that you can start finding ties to community outside of just your little group, right? Because the goal is to have as many connections as possible. That way, if something does go down or things go as bad as they can, some of these people might be willing to take you in, help you travel to get to somewhere else, somewhere safer. Some of them, obviously, I mean, might end up like finding ways to shelter people or to move people from here and there. And like I said, it sounds frightening, but start making plans now. Don't wait until 2024 at the next presidential election when it's like, oh shit, we elected a fascist, right? Don't wait until then. Start establishing these. And I know for a lot of people, like it's not just like an introvert thing. A lot of people have difficulty just making friends. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you just follow enough people and they have like similar interests to you, or they have a similar enough like identity to you, you'll eventually start seeing like in your feed people talking about like, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, Mario Kart or something. They will have similar interests to you eventually, and you can reach out and connect on that level. And then hopefully over time, you will build a small group of friends that you can possibly fall back on if you don't have family that are in the areas that you need to get to, or you don't have family that can help you. If you don't have old like high school friends or middle school friends that you haven't talked to in a long time, maybe you can make online friends that can fulfill the same type of purpose for you, right? And I know it might sound like, oh, it feels a little weird to join a bunch of communities or start following people and stuff just because I'm looking to like set up an escape plan or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? Because the same people that you're making friends with and that you'd be talking to, it might end up being a situation later on where you do get somewhere where you're safe, and then you can find a way to help them get to that same place or give them information, right? The third thing that I would suggest is to make sure that not all of your finances are wrapped up in just credit cards and debit cards, because those can be turned off at a bank. Try and get as much of a savings as you can built up. And you can either do it the old school way and kind of like keep money in like a safe or something like that. Or if things start to get bad enough, just keep in mind that before you go on a trip or before you like leave the area, you might want to withdraw a large amount of cash from your bank or institution, wherever you're keeping it. You want to keep a lot of cash on hand because it's much easier to keep moving and pay for gas or just buy goods and stuff without being able to be tracked through a credit card or a debit card. And that would also ensure that your funds cannot just be cut off arbitrarily by like the state government. So that would be the other thing to suggest. Another thing would be, if possible, start looking at finding remote work. And I know there are like websites, there are areas that you can go to online where you can search specifically for finding like online jobs, like telemarketing and that sort of thing, because that will start cutting ties for as often as you need to travel back and forth. So like fewer and fewer people are noticing where you're going, where you live, where you're traveling from. And possibly while you're on the move, while you're mobile, you'd also be able to work and still earn some type of income. And last but not least, if possible, and for most people this is going to be like just not feasible, start converting your life over into a much more mobile lifestyle. So I don't know, invest in a camper, invest in some type of small trailer that you could haul behind your car, so that you could take refuge and stop at campsites and that type of stuff across the country. And speaking of which, if you are on the run or you are on the move, just know that so truck stops across the country, specifically Pilot and Travelers of America, also known as TA stations, have showers in them. And you can go there and you can get a shower for like $15, or you can like use a points reward system to get it. And that you can sleep in front of those truck stops in their parking lot, and most of the time they will not bother you or call the police or anything like that, because a lot of truckers are parked in the back and they stay there for days at a time. Majority of the time they are not going to care if you park a sedan in front of their truck stop and you sleep, or if you go in there and you purchase a shower or whatever. And speaking of which, specifically when it comes to those truck stops, Pilot TA loves, you can get a rewards card, just like you apply for a rewards card for like frequent flyer miles on an airplane. And you can start using those so that every time that you fuel up at one of those stations, which there's tons of them all over the country, you start getting rewards points. And over time, you can rack up enough points so that even if somebody cut off your debit card or your credit card, if they didn't think about a rewards card from a place like that, you could theoretically get food, water, gas, showers, clothes, all your basic needs for survival at those truck stops, while you're also moving from different campsites. You could stay incredibly mobile, incredibly difficult to find, if you switched over to living a lifestyle like that. Now, this is worst case scenario, obviously, and I'm not trying to like scare anybody into like, oh God, I gotta sell my house or something like that. I'm just saying that if possible, these are some of the things to think about. These are some of the things to start preparing for, so that I've known preppers before that have bug out bags. I would also suggest to make bug out bags and that sort of thing, which basically just has like some basic supplies, as well as like a medical kit and that sort of thing. You can also just like YouTube bug out bags, something that is light, portable. You can just walk in, grab it, and go. Last but not least, I would suggest to start getting your identification in order. Get a passport. If you don't have a passport, take advantage of the Biden administration's change to changing the gender marker on your ID. It doesn't matter at what stage your transition is. If you are transitioning and you want to like change your name, if you can go ahead and update your name and update your gender marker. And that way, if you're ever stopped and somebody wants to check your ID, your name will match, your gender marker will match. If it's on your state ID, like in the state that I'm in, they make you put your gender marker on your identification. And this is just so that while you're traveling or while you're moving from place to place, if you get stopped and somebody's looking at your identification, it's all going to match what you're saying. so that you can avoid suspicion in that type of way. The passport is a little bit more pricey, but it will allow you to go to like any other country that we don't have restricted travel to, or like theoretically the pandemic isn't shutting down like going to that country at that time. Yeah, TARDIS. I definitely don't want you to say anything that could like lead to any type of doxing, but yeah, call centers. I know like there's a lot of like telephone work that you can call, like you can do remotely from your home. And obviously like if you were traveling, but you could still like again, a lot of these truck stops have areas where you can set up and use your Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So you could theoretically set up at like the little cafe inside of a lot of them and then use their Wi-Fi, and you could work remotely that way and still get paid while you're moving around. That's a good point. And I would say for now, I think that would be like as much advice as I'm comfortable giving. Get your passport, update your IDs if you possibly can. Create a bug out bag. Start shifting your job if you can obviously take the pay cut to more remote work. Get a pilot card, or I think it's called like a Platinum 1 card from Travel Insurance of America. Every time that you need fuel, start fueling up and use those cards to get your points, and start saving up points as much as possible. That way, if you're ever in a bind, or hey, like you're helping a friend or something travel and you don't want to like give them cash or whatever, you can go in with them and then just pay with your points. And nobody has any information on you other than that you ran a points card. Reach out to friends and family as much as possible. And I think that'll wrap up this segment. And I'm sorry to bring it on such kind. I was hoping to be a lot more hopeful, but saying that stuff is like, it's depressing, and I wish the world was a better place than it is. And hopefully somebody finds some of this information helpful, or at least entertaining. Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.